give you an overview of what Designate is. We're going to talk about the REST API. We are also going to talk about how Designate and Neutron interface. We will go through Designate Central, and we will talk about Designate Sync, and actually provide you with some testimonials and examples of Designate Sync. Okay. So, overview. Okay. So first of all, what is Designate? Designate is a DNS as a service component in Openstack. It provides the DNS piece that Openstack desperately needs. It consists of three main parts. It has a REST API. It has Designate Central, where all the work is being done, and has Designate Sync, which is an interface into Nova, Neutron, and other Openstack components. Designate works very similar to the other Openstack components. It communicates both internally and externally using the message queue. There is a client that's provided for you, which will allow you to manage servers. And when we talk about servers in this case, we're talking about NS records, domains, and records. More functionality is also available in the REST API that you cannot use in the Designate client. So the important things to understand as we go through these slides and understand how Designate works is Designate is going to be the source of record for your DNS records for all of the domains that it manages. No other application or tool will be able to make changes to those domains. Designate needs to be the source of record for them. And it's important to note as we go through these slides that domains are owned by tenants. Okay. If you want to find out more information about Designate, here's a useful website that you can go to, which provides a lot more information for you. Graham?
Yes. So I'm going to run through quickly what the architecture for Designate is like. And as you can see here, the user mainly interfaces with the API and with the DNS server. So the components like API and the central are horizontally scalable because everything goes through a message queue. So for example, if a user wants to create a record inside a zone, they make a call to the API. The API will then check their auth token with Keystone, just like you would with Nova or Neutron or any other OpenStack services. Once it's validated that that user is valid, it passes the message onto the queue, which we have marked there AMQP, which is generally something like Rabbit or Cupid. Then one of the central nodes will take the message off the queue, store the information in the database, and then pass off the message to the back end, which tells the DNS server to update the record or create the record. Now, because everything is pluggable, the backends and the databases and the messaging service can all be replaced with different technologies if you need them. With backends, we support DNS, Bind9 sort of, and quite a few other databases, or a few other backends that have been submitted through open source. Our database currently is all run through SQL Alchemy, so any database that SQL Alchemy supports, we support at the moment as well. And that's just a quick overview. We'll be running through the different type of endpoints in the REST API in a second.
Okay.
So next slide.
Thanks, Graham. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what your capabilities are in the REST API. So there are two versions of the REST API. One of them is very solid, first version, version 1. It allows you the management of servers, domains, and records. Additional functionality was added, and at that point, version 2 of the API was created. This version will allow you to import and export zones. It'll allow you to manage the top-level domains if you choose to. It'll also allow you to blacklist zones if you choose to. And then finally, it allows for managed floating IP pointer records. So more information about the REST API can be found at this link. When we talk about the Designate client, the client is a command line interface, very similar to the Keystone and the Nova command line interfaces. The Designate client also has a shell, so if you wanted to just run Designate and then run the individual commands inside the shell, it'll allow you to do that. Functionality is a subset of the entire Designate API. Specifically, it deals with the server, the domains, and the records, all the things that are available in version 1 of the Designate REST API. Graham?
So one of the features which we added as part of the V2 API is zone import and export. So what this allows us to do is when a client does a GET request to a zone endpoint, they can specify the content type text/DNS, which means it'll return a zone file that's compatible with bind. So users can then push that into any other servers if needed. It also allows for users to import zones from zone files. So once you have a zone file in a bind format, you can post that to the zones endpoint, and it'll create a zone and the records and the record sets for that zone automatically from that request.
Yeah, just a second, Graham. Hey, can you guys mute on that end? I'm hearing background noise. Sorry, go ahead, Graham. Sorry.
Sure. So there's also a tool in the Designate repo which called Zone Extractor, and this helps. If you have your zone files split across multiple files, it'll allow you to extract them into one file, which you can then use to post to Designate to create the zone. So next slide. In the V2 API as well, we have added support for restricting the top-level domains that users can create zones in. By default, users can create whatever zones they want, whatever TLDs they want, but this allows operators to manage what top-level domains are used. Say you're in a private cloud situation, and you only want users using .local or .cloud or whatever TLD you're using within the private cloud. You can restrict users to that. You can also input all of the valid top-level domains to ensure that nobody creates weird records or weird zones that they can't then query because the top-level domain isn't valid. And it's a simple get, post, or patch to manage this. And by default within Designate, we have that set to admins only, but because we use a policy file like most of the other Openstack projects, that can be configurable to allow, say, your support staff manage the top-level domains as well as administrators. So next slide. Building from the top-level domains, we also allow you to blacklist domains. So this allows you to set regexes that will be run against every new zone that's created to ensure that, say you're working in a public cloud situation, you might want to stop people who aren't part of your company creating domains that would look like they belong to your company, or hijacking domains that might be part of your domains in the future. So this allows, and because this is on the fly, you can create and update these without having to restart Designate. And you see, then it's also very easy to view what blacklists are also in place at the moment. Try reading what Mido was saying. Again, this is by default, it's administrators only, but this again can be set to allow support staff to manage these items. What is also, when we block the creation of any zones that are blocked by a blacklist or a top-level domain, it's important to note that an administrator can create a zone however they want. So say you have a blacklist that, say, for example, blocks hp.com or anything containing HP from being created. You can allow your support staff to create those domains on behalf of users, so that the domains aren't blacklisted forever. They just need support staff or administrator intervention. So next slide. We've also done a lot of work on integrating Neutron and Designate to make it easy to manage floating IPs and the reverse DNS for those. So next slide there. There's a new endpoint in Designate that allows users to create pointer records for any floating IPs that are currently associated with their tenant. So this allows the operator just to delegate the entire reverse zone for their address space to Designate and not have to worry about people having to do manual reverse DNS creation and allowing users to manage it themselves. Because they can only set pointers for IPs currently associated with their tenant, there's no access issues, and it gives a degree of freedom to users that isn't necessarily available anywhere else. And next slide. So, for example, it's probably quite small, you won't be able to read it, but there's a better example in a slide or two. When a user does a call to floating IPs, they get a list back of all the floating IPs associated with their tenant. So this is just an array of floating IPs. So if you click next slide, it'll show you. This is what a floating IP looks like when a user gets it for the first time. So it has the address, any description, and then the ID. So this is what a floating IP looks like without any pointer set in it or any TTL. So if you go to the next slide, this is how a user would set, for example, demo001.example.io is now set as the pointer record for 10.6.11.251. And this, yeah, it's a good point, Joe. And this will automatically set this will set the zone PTRD name on the backend server, and as soon as the user loses that domain, they disassociate it from their account, we receive an event from Neutron and then we delete it straight away. So this means that there's no issue with users hijacking reverse DNS from anyone else. Okay, so next slide.
Okay, so the next piece of Designate, next component we want to talk about within Designate is Designate Central. Designate Central is the core code for Designate. It's the piece that does all the work. Designate Central does all of this with pluggable pieces. So, for example, the storage driver for Designate is pluggable, and currently SQL Alchemy is the default pluggable storage driver there. There are also pluggable backend drivers for the DNS operations. So, for example, maybe you have a Power DNS DNS servers in your environment. You have NDS4, et cetera, et cetera. You can put whatever backend driver you want in, configure it into Designate if there's a driver available, and you can use that pluggable backend driver for all your Designate operations. So currently, we support Power DNS, NSD4, FreeIPA, Designate, and Bind9. But I will point out that Bind9 needs some work. So it's not the most stable of backend drivers. If you have a back end that for example here at eBay we have Nominum on the back end. You have a back end that doesn't have a driver that's currently supported in Designate. It's fairly trivial to write a back end driver for Designate such that your DNS server is supported. So all you need to do is you need to provide functionality to be able to create, update, and delete tsig keys, domains, record sets, and records. Again, there's an example. If you follow either the PowerDNS code or you look at the bind9 code, there's two examples there that you can use to get you started. But writing a backend driver I found to be fairly trivial, easy to do. In the next release, or in one of the future releases of Designate, we're going to have a mini DNS. And what the mini DNS is going to do for us is it's going to serve records using zone transfers, whether it's a full zone transfer or an incremental zone transfer, and it's going to simplify these backend drivers. So you won't be writing code to create, update, and delete record sets, or create, up, and delete records and things like that. Again, the code isn't difficult to write, but this is going to simplify that. There will be some code that needs to be written for the backend drivers, but it's going to be much simpler. If you need more information about backend drivers, here's a link for you. Graham?
Yep. So this is just a simple overview of what will happen when we get mini DNS in place. So the idea is that the backends, when mini DNS is in place, will only be responsible for creating and deleting zones within the customer-facing DNS server. And then the customer-facing DNS server will just do zone transfers from the mini DNS server to update its records. So when a API request comes in to create or modify a record within a zone, Central will notify mini DNS and sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't exit, just hit minimize. I don't know why it does that.
Sorry, Kai's laptop was popping stuff up for me. So mini DNS will then send DNS notify to the customer-facing DNS server to let them know that there's been a change or a new record created, and the DNS server will then make a transfer request to get the new information and update its store. So if it's bind, it'll be updating its own files, or if it's PowerDNS, it'll be updating its database. And this, as Ron said, will dramatically simplify how the backends work and will allow us to extend the features of DNS a lot further as time goes on. If anyone has any particular questions about mini DNS, it'll probably be a major point of discussion in the designs the design sessions have already happened at this point. Sorry, I was going to say talk about the design sessions, but they will have happened already. If anyone has any particular interest, talk to any of the members from the DNS, from the Designate team. We can all talk to you about how it's going to work. So next slide.
Okay, so the next thing we wanted to discuss with you guys is Designate Sync. For the most part, everything we've talked about up to this point has been, very useful and stuff. But we feel this is the piece of Designate that most of you guys are gonna have an interest in, because this is how you're gonna provide your automatic record creation into DNS from your other OpenStack components. Designate Sync consumes events from Nova, Neutron, and other services, and it turns those events into DNS operations. The events that are consumed and what DNS operations are performed are determined by custom notification handlers. Designate ships with 2 sample notification handlers. One of them is a Nova notification handler, and it consumes events, specifically a VM record create, or a VM create and a VM delete. It consumes those events, and it'll create an A record for you. In Neutron, or for Neutron, we also have another custom notification handler that ships with Designate, and it'll consume a floating IP, create and delete, and it'll actually create those records for you. We understand that the default custom notification handlers that ship probably aren't going to satisfy your needs. You know, Designate's highly flexible. You have the ability to plug in a backend. You have the ability to plug in your storage. Your storage. We feel that you probably looked at this and said, yeah, SQL Alchemy will work for me. My backend's there, but this is probably the piece that you will be writing for yourself, a custom notification handler. So we're gonna talk to you a little bit about eBay and what they've done for this, and then Graham will talk to you a little bit about what HP has done for this. So currently at eBay, we have a unified DNS, which is a completely different application. It's got a REST API. It's written in Java. It supports Nominum and Bind DNS servers. There is another application that sits in between Unified DNS and OpenStack, and this turns notification events from other OpenStack components, specifically Nova VM. Again, talking about VMs. When you create a VM or you delete a VM, it turns those notifications into Unified DNS API calls. Well, what I've done and what eBay has done is we've written our own Designate custom notification handler, and I'll tell you, the only reason I'm going to show you the initial design and our final design is to show you the flexibility that's available here within Designate. So on our initial design, we thought we'll have a very granular approach to everything. We'll have a single forward and reverse zone per tenant. So you have a user that's in a tenant. It's going to create a VM. There's a forward zone associated with that. There's a reverse zone associated with that. We would take the context, the user, the tenant, the token off the notification message, and we'll go ahead and create that. AN pointer record for you. Well, it turns out that granular approach didn't work for us. We had a need to actually have multiple tenants right into the same reverse zone, for example. That was one example. Another thing is at eBay we have a concept of a virtual private cloud or a VPC. We have our tenants split into different categories. We have a dev virtual private cloud. We have a prod virtual private cloud, and we have an external virtual private cloud, or VPCs. Well, what we've done for there is we've implemented those VPCs as special tenants. These are tenants that users don't see. Nobody's creating VMs in them or whatnot, and these are the three that we have there. Then we group the tenants that the users are actually using, the projects they're actually using, into these VPCs. And what this allows us to do, instead of having a very granular approach where we have a single forward and a reverse zone per tenant, we have many forward and reverse zones associated with a tenant. Well, the trick there is then how do you select which forward or reverse zone are you going to use? Well, what happens is Nova has the ability to has a metadata API, and when you go and create a VM, you can pass this metadata down into the notification message. And what we're doing is in our Designate custom notification handler, we're picking up this metadata. So, for example, we're passing a zone, which will be the forward zone for the A record. We're passing a host name, which is the host name portion of the fully qualified domain name for that A record. And we've passed the VPC that tenant is in. What we do then is in Designate, we map that VPC name to a VPC, the actual tenant, and then there's a service account that's set up, which is a member of each of those VPC tenants. Because remember, I told you in the beginning that the domains are owned by tenants. This allows us to actually interface with that domain, create the AN pointer record. So we take that service account, which is a member of these VPC tenants, and we use that service account to add the AN pointer records. So, Graham?
Cool. I need to actually paste the code in there. So we probably shouldn't say that this is being used in HP. It's more of a was the design for HP and hasn't made it to production. I don't want to make people think we have something we don't have yet. But with Designate now, there's a soon-to-be merged options endpoint, which means that a user can set their preferred host or domain name or zone name for creating records. So when the sync handler sends in a notification, it can take the VM name or the host name, and from the tenant from the context get the tenant ID, and look up what their default domain is to create records in. It then creates a record in this domain, and then can create the reverse DNS, the pointer record for that IP address as well, and then just continue on. And it's the same for when it's being deleted. It can be removed from Designate from the deleted message, because it'll just reverse that process and delete it. The options API is very simple, especially from the sync handler. It's 2 lines of code. It's implemented within Central. So the sync handler would just call Central with the tenant ID and the key name, and it gets a value back with the right zone to create it. So it's more like the initial design that eBay had, which might be more useful for a public cloud or a larger, more multi-tenanted private cloud. And with that, I think we are time for questions. Next question.
Okay, so questions?
Hey guys, this is Joe. Nice job. I can tell this is a great way to get folks acclimated to Designate and give them some good information to go on. My question was maybe more specific to feedback on the presentation. It's okay to provide that. So on the custom notification handler portion, where you guys are talking about sync,
yeah.
I found myself, I must admit, we have not had to come across this yet, so my knowledge is scant. But I wonder if the attendees would understand what a custom notification handler is exactly, and maybe you can touch more on the use cases for that. And Ron, you had some detail on your slide, but I wonder if maybe focusing on the actual code or how to write a custom handler or the outcomes that I get as a user from writing a custom handler, I think those kind of things would probably be useful.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the things I was going to suggest is providing just on a slide a list of the events that Nova and Neutron emit. So the list of things that you can have your code triggered by. And that would, Neutron port create, instance boot, start, and so on. So people will get a good idea from looking at those lists what actions they can have their code triggered on, have the handler triggered on, and it might make it click a little bit more.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I just having heard you explain that there is a list like that immediately helps me grasp the concept.
Okay. Maybe what we'll do for the code is let's maybe open up the Nova handler code, the default one that ships with Designate, and then we can show them here's the process notification. Here's where you write what events you're going to handle in this custom notification handler. Here's where you write how you're going to handle those events, which kind of ties this all together. And then I'll talk about the different Nova and Neutron events. So that's a good idea.
It would also be useful to have some examples of the payload data that is sent along with those events.
Okay, we'll do that.
You know, for example, the compute instance create end, where you get the IP address that Nova sends.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Joe, by the way, how long was that? You was it 30 minutes in total?
I had 28 minutes and 40 seconds.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Yeah,
40 minutes.
So,
Very good.
Graham, maybe the team here can say maybe we don't talk so much about the eBay and the HP specific solutions, but we go into more detail about the payload, the Nova events, the Neutron events, and then show them some code out of the default handlers and talk to them a little bit about.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay.
I like the fact that you mentioned eBay and HP and how they're doing it, because it actually gives a more concrete example of how this is being used. That I think will serve a better purpose rather than trying to give something generic.
I was just going to say the same thing. I like that.
Well, my concern is the time, because if we're at 28 now and we go into more detail and show a payload, show the events, show the process notification, we're going to eat up another 5 minutes. So we have 40 total.
This isn't in HP either, so we can't say it's being used in HP. It's more of a general. If HP was to implement it, this is theoretically what it might look like.
Yeah. Ours is planned. It's written and being tested, but not there yet either. But it is written and we're actually testing it now. So
yeah, I mean, just to add to Vinod's point, I think real life or proposed real life examples definitely are more compelling, provided that they are not overly detailed or we get lost in unrelated stuff. So.
Do you think the eBay one was overly detailed? Should I just cut it?
No, I think actually the amount of detail was
really
good. I mean, the only thing that I would add is probably Joe would probably help, and what Kyle mentioned earlier about putting in a list.
Yeah, but I think even if you put a slide with that list in, you can do that in 30 seconds. You can just say, look, these are the kinds of events you've got from Nova and Neutron.
Okay.
And people should be able to scan that very quickly. It's not like they're unique things that they've never heard of. It will have things like instant boot. So that they won't have to spend too much time thinking about them, but it will just showing that list will make it click, if you get me, I think.
Yeah, okay, we'll do that.
Yeah.
I think where I got lost is Ron, you mentioned the Java app that you guys had and kind of the before and after solution, which I think is probably informative if you were having like a one-on-one conversation with somebody. But to me, I was confused about how that relates specifically to the notification handlers.
Gotcha.
You guys have a link to the slides?
Yeah.
Dropped in the Atlanta workshop one.
Another thing I'm not sure if you mentioned, but at least at the beginning or at the end, it would be good to mention that we'll be having a workshop too. You can get down into more details.
I'd mention it at the beginning.
Yeah, maybe at the end as well. When we're finished, I was going to say we do it after the questions. We say, listen, if you're
It won't be after the questions.
or
Questions will continue on, and you'll be getting kicked out of the room. You won't have time.
Okay, we'll mention it in the beginning.
yeah.
I'll actually put it on one of the. I think on a slide for it. I'll put it in the agenda at the bottom and say don't forget to attend the workshop.
I would say anything you guys can do to plug that would be good.
Yeah, so I've just dropped a link to his slides into the chat there.
I'm sorry, what?
Somebody was asking about it for a link to the slides. I just dropped a link to the slides into the chat.
Oh, okay.
So one quick question on the slide that has the mini DNS on there with the AXFR and IXFR. The one before this one, that's right. Wait. Yes, okay. The second bullet, the second big bullet in the first slide 21, it says it will serve records using zone transfers. At this point, this may be the future, right? But right now, this is not the intent for mini DNS, right? It's just an internal way to make sure that our work is easier on how to update backends on the fly and everything will be in sync. So I wonder if there's a better way to present that bullet. I know that Graham moved it more towards that, towards that end when he talked about it being currently used only internally and all that. But I wonder if this bullet here will be something that we can clean up a little bit until we are ready to actually expose it.
What?
Oh, on slide 21.
Yeah, I'm looking.
The second bullet and the first sub bullet under that. It just says serve records using zone transfers.
So maybe the reword of that might be uses zone transfers to push data to the public DNS servers or something. Do you get me?
Oh, I got you. Instead of serves, it might be confusing. Gotcha.
It's a real public DNS server.
How about pushes data using? How's that?
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah, I think because we're the next slide I'll be saying it is internal as well. I think that's enough to.
Yeah. You guys have any questions about all the feedback in the chat?
I copied all that feedback into the Atlanta workshop Etherpad. I know it's not the workshop, but whatever. Just so that we had it, because it disappears once we close the Hangout.
Oh.
No, I think I got all the answers there.
Cool. Okay. Well, nice job, guys. I looked at the attendee list the other day, like yesterday, and there was like 50 people signed up for this. So
Yeah.
I think you guys did a great job here. I feel like it's gonna go very well.
I'm getting a lot of questions internally at Red Hat about Designate and DNS integration as well, from both the developers who are doing Openstack and the people that are deploying the OS1.
Cool.
Okay, so yeah, guys, I think that was actually very, very good. Ron, I think Graham added a placeholder slide for that actually already.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think he put as much detail, but just so you know, that there's there's two of them there.
I got it. Yep. Okay. I'll fix all this up. Okay.
So I guess we can conclude the focus on this particular presentation and switch up to the workshop.
Yep.
You guys mind if
We get to 60 people now for the talk.
Oh wow! And it's just gonna slope up exponentially as we get closer. No pressure, no pressure. I mean, like I said, like assuming this is the same room, I don't know what room this is capacity-wise compared to the workshop one, but the workshop's at 300 is the limit on the number of people. So
I thought you meant 300 names down. That was how many names are down on that one?
That was 50 in there.
Cool.
No, we're a separate room.
But yeah, it's less people, but doing the workshop with so many folks, I think everybody's going to be busy in the audience working and helping out. So I'm glad everybody's participating there. Before we get started on the workshop portion, do you guys mind if we take a little break?
I was literally just about to ask that exact question. I've got about 5 minutes that I've got to handle something else.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll meet you guys back. Well, you said 5 minutes. Why don't we just make it 12?
12? Okay, your thing's got 12 minutes, is it?
Top of the hour, I should say.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right, speak to you guys.
Yeah, top of the hour.
Okay. I'll leave the Hangout on. guys. Rackspace folks are back.
Okay. Hey, I noticed we have a new face on this, Nicole.
I can speak to who Nicole is, but I don't know if she's there and wants to speak up herself. She may have checked out for a second. Okay. Well, Nicole is our product manager, so she wanted to join in and listen in on what we were scheming for next week.
Okay. Okay. If Kyle was there, I would show him the errors I'm getting with Vagrant, but we could do it after this as well, after the presentation.
Yeah.
Getting it done before would probably be helpful to see if we need to change anything.
Ron, sounds like you can go ahead. I mean, Kyle just stepped back, and we're all curious about the error.
Hey Kyle, just something for you to think about while we're doing this presentation is this is what's happening. Like I said, I walked away, came in this morning, started up my tried to start up Vagrant, and then what happens is it never comes up. You can see that here. So eventually,
you're not actually sharing your screen at the minute, Ron, so I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was. All right, my fault.
No problem.
There we go. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so I rebooted my PC. Started my PC this morning, which I normally don't do. Did the Vagrant up, and that's when I noticed that it just was it was never coming up. Yeah, so eventually it just times out. I went ahead and halted everything, tried it again, timed out, never came up. So I didn't wait for it this time. And then ultimately what I ended up doing is just starting up the GUI, and that's when I noticed it was hung at that one screen. Just something for you to think about. Just we don't have to solve this here because we have a way around it, but the users, we may have some users that see this problem when we go into Thursday.
Yeah, I've never actually tried rebooting the PC after starting it up, so I can give that a go after this call. And hopefully it's reproducible. If it is, we'll figure out a fix.
Okay. If not, like I said, the workaround is we'll just have them start the GUI, and then they can SSH into it. Do you have a password on root or the Vagrant account at all?
I can't. I seem to remember. Yes, I think there's a password on it. It will be in the. If you look in the HTTP folder, there'll be the Pixie Boo config.
Okay, I'll look. No biggie. Okay, we can start.
Cool.
Do you want me to do the slides like last time?
I don't mind. Whoever wants to do it.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, we're going to have to hand it over to Emmanuel when it gets to his portion, but I think that's, when we get there, that's fine. I think it will work well if you do the slides.
I did also leave some notes in the notes sections for the slides because I think some of these slides need a little bit of work. Like this one here, install operate Rocket. I thought maybe it'd be better if we did install it, operate it Rocket. But I also thought this next slide, let's see, where did it go? The agenda is wrong.
Yeah, I think that needs to be updated to actually match all the headings throughout.
And the only other suggestion I had was I don't know if it makes sense to go from intro to designate and free IPA to designate operations. I'm not sure if that's oh, you moved this. Okay. Never mind. I think designate and free IPA was after operations. No. I don't know if it makes sense to go from install, which we lost the intro screen here, it looks like, to this to this.
Could you repeat that one more time? That last part.
I don't know if it makes sense to go from installing Designate to talking about free IPA and Designate to then doing the operations. That just
No, it doesn't.
Oh.
No, I think the plan was to just mention free IPA at the very end, where during the development talk, where Kyle mentions what backends are supported.
okay. And Rich, we get a mention in our presentation as well to you. So.
Okay, that's fine. That's good. Thank you.
Hey, Ron. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on the suggestion. So on the agenda page, you mentioned. I mean, we removed the free IPA bit because we're going to discuss it later. But should the headings as they are now are a little less detailed than what's on the agenda? Should we match the headings for the individual portions exactly, or?
Okay, I guess if this is it, we should remove the update part here, right? Sorry.
Yeah, we can do that. I'll do it real quick.
But I think you were taking away plus Nova /
Yeah, I'm just wondering, should we remove the Nova Neutron portion? And I removed Power DNS, but I wonder if we should leave it there. Anybody have thoughts?
I think the agenda should just match the headers. That's my opinion. But
Yeah, I agree. They should just match the title slides throughout.
Okay. Simple enough. I'll remove Designate because that's obviously the point of what we're talking about. All right, that's as bare bones as it gets. Awesome. That's how it should be.
And I think you mentioned that.
Well, there's also another header here though that says Nova and Neutron, and there's we have 4 headers.
I missed those. So Designate plus Nova Neutron. And we're going to remove the free IPA one, right?
Yeah, we're going to remove that one. Correct.
Right, I'll remove it real quick.
And I think the agenda should match exactly what the header page is.
Yeah, that's what they said.
And there should be a header for install. Oh, you have it up here. Never mind. The install one's early. It's before all the people.
Oh, yeah, that's wrong.
Yeah, it's obviously just got moved by mistake.
And, okay, I hope you guys don't mind. I kind of shifted around the different organizations. I guess the sort order on those. I was trying to go for, I guess, tenure. And, not that it's a huge deal, but I would like to just mention some things about the HP contributors at the end. So, you guys mind going by tenure?
No, no problem. I'm
That's
a little
fine.
scared about what you're planning on telling people about us, but guess we'll find out soon enough.
We're not on the
That's right. Don't get in trouble.
Sorry, we haven't had that much to drink together, so I don't have great stories yet.
Okay.
Okay. Well, why don't we get started?
Yep.
All right. I'm hitting the timer now. Welcome to the Designate workshop to install, operate, and just rock your DNS needs. Next slide. So before we get started, we do ask that you complete a couple of requirements with your laptop. First of all, ideally you have 3 gigabytes of RAM, but if you have 2, you could probably get by. Make sure you've installed VirtualBox and Vagrant as well. That software is available from these downloads. It is also available on the USB drives that we provided as you were walking in. So if you do have those requirements installed, make sure you download the Vagrant directory from the provided USB drive. And when I say download, I mean copy it over to your hard drive so that you can work with it locally. And if there's somebody near you who doesn't have a drive, please pass the drive along so we can share the love. Once you have installed the software and you have copied over the Vagrant directory, please change directory into that directory and run the following command, vagrant up. This will ensure that your VM is running and you're ready to progress forward with the rest of the workshop. So as you folks complete those steps, I'm going to go ahead and describe the agenda and talk a little bit about our introduction and introduce our team. So the most recent team member, or I'm sorry, I'm a little lost here. Agenda. I should probably do that last.
Okay, hang on.
Ron has the slides because it's
let me restart. Maybe I don't have the current slides.
That's right.
Nope, still goes from workshop requirements to agenda.
Okay.
This is.
That's fine. I'll probably move the agenda to the end, but I'll just talk to
Okay, you want to do this?
Yeah, this is fine. Wait a second. Let me just move the agenda to the. There we
Sure.
go. All right. I don't know if that'll reflect on your slides, but it's at the end. Okay.
Let me get them going again. Hang on. Okay. Okay, we come off this. Go ahead.
So I'd like to introduce the team that's here in the room. First of all, from Red Hat, we have Rich Megginson. Rich, please raise your hand. Rich will be available, as well as some of our other team members, for any sort of help and assistance you may have as we progress forward. Rich joins us from Red Hat. Next slide. And from Rackspace, we have Emmanuel Ankutse, who's up here with me. He's a developer. He's going to be presenting the installation portion of this. Betsy Lusader. Betsy, please raise your hand. Thank you, Betsy. Betsy will be out there helping out too. Vinod Mangalpally is also assisting, and I'll just be up here kind of making sure we're making progress on time and progressing forward. Next slide. And from eBay, we have Ron. Ron, you say Ricard, right?
Ricard.
Okay, like Picard. Got it.
Like Picard.
Okay. So we have Ricard up here. Ron will be presenting as well for you guys on the operation and the sync portions. Next slide. And from HP, we have Graham Hayes. Graham also presented earlier today. You may have saw him talking about the operators presentation. Graham's also in the audience too. So Graham, please raise your hand. Everybody knows you can go to him if you need help. And last, and certainly not least, Kyle McInnes. Kyle is our project technical lead. Some would say possibly the benevolent dictator. But certainly more benevolent than anything. I just want to pay respect to Kyle. He's been very gracious to allow other team members of the Designate project to speak. He's kind of stepped to the side a little bit and let everybody kind of really contribute. So that kind of leadership is the kind of community leadership that we need to really progress forward on OpenStack. Next slide. So a real quick agenda. We'll be doing installation as promised. We'll walk through all the steps, so make sure you got your terminal ready. We'll also be diving into the some basic operations of how Designate functions. Also be digging into the Nova Neutron, the current Nova Neutron integration. And finally, Kyle is going to walk us through how to contribute to the project if you're interested, as well as more information. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emmanuel Ankutse.
Thank you, Joe. Again, my name is Emmanuel Ankutse from Rackspace. In this segment of the workshop, we will be installing Designate, and that would include the Power DNS backend. So on USB, we have for you a virtual machine image pre-installed with the essential Openstack services that form the ecosystem for Designate. So we have Neutron, Keystone, Glance, Nova, RabbitMQ, MySQL, and their respective clients installed.
Actually, Ron, for this portion, can you continue presenting the slides? And when he gets to the part where he switches up from the slide, he'll take over sharing his screen.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you already walk through this part?
No. So,
actually, let's make sure we're on the right slide. Can you go back one?
there should be a picture somewhere.
One more? Okay.
That's not
Yeah.
designated, okay?
Go forward. Okay, good. All right.
Which one do you want me to be on?
All right. So we are. Where are we?
Which slide do you want me to be on?
You want? Did you already do this?
You already did this one.
Okay.
You already did this one.
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. So
Then
let's
you
go
do it
back
now.
then. Okay. So sorry.
Go to the one that says Vagrant SSH.
That was this one?
The one before this, yeah.
Well, the one before it is
There's
this.
some lags. That's
Okay. So by now you have a Vagrant installed and VirtualBox as well on your host system, and we have for you the USB, and you are copying or have copied over the virtual machine to your host machine. If you need any help, please raise your hand, and you will get help from the Designate contributors that are in the room right now. Next slide. Yes. Okay, so what we're going to do is that we're going to install and configure. We're going to configure Power DNS backend, install Designate services, and also the Designate client, and verify that the installation is working. Next slide. For context, here is a picture of the ecosystem for Designate. So the Designate is the orange boxes. It has the API, central, and backend. And those are the ones that we are going to install in this session. The other ones are components that have been pre-installed for you and are in the VM and will show up when you bring up the VM. So with that said, we are going to go and start installing Designate, and we begin with we're going to bring up the VM, and the way you do this is to CD into the directory that you copied over from the USB, and at that point, you do a listing, and you should see a file named Vagrant file. Then you know you are in the correct directory. If you are there with me, then we're going to start up the machine, the virtual machine, and the command is Vagrant up. Now, we also have for you the instructions on a wiki, but also once we get onto the machine, they are available to you in home Vagrant install.txt, and you can copy and paste to follow along. For now, Vagrant up to bring up the machine.
Okay, guys, Emmanuel, are you sharing?
Next slide, and then I guess.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Now I go to share. Okay, so here we go. Click to share. Okay, here we go. Okay, now that you've brought up the machine, we can log into it using Vagrant SSH. Now you are on the machine, and you should be in the directory home Vagrant. And again, like I mentioned, all the commands that we're going to use are in the install.txt file in this home directory. By the way, off the line, that file doesn't exist yet. I'm going to copy it and put it into the Packer after this. Great. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go and sorry. So now we are on the machine, and the first thing we need to do is to go into the directory Designate. So the full path then is home Vagrant Designate. And normally the two commands in italics are things that you would do to install requirements or dependencies for Designate, but they've been done for us and are already in the VM. So the next step we do here is to do some setup by doing the last command here, which is the sudo python setup development. The next step then would be to set up configuration file for Designate. And the first thing is for us to go further into another directory, which would be etc Designate. And here you see templates of all the config files that you will need for Designate. The two that we are most concerned about here would be the root.wrap.conf as well as the designate.conf. However, the designate.conf is the one that has all the configuration for Designate. We will first make a copy of the template files or the sample files and then modify them. The way we do and make the copy is to execute the command, the little script over here that will make a copy of the files for you. Now, when you ls, you see that we have copies. We have designate.conf made from the designate.conf sample, and also rootwrap.conf made from the sample file. For the purposes of this install, we have already we've created the designate.conf file for you with the correct values set in them. So rather than go and edit the file, we are going to overwrite the current designate.conf file with one that is in home Vagrant and called designate.conf.workshop. So we can copy and paste that command and have it copied over. Now, I will later on walk you through a few sections of the configuration file when we're done. But for now, we're going to go ahead and create a couple of directories that we need. One of them is going to be a directory where Designate will store state information. And you can create that like so. The other one is for Designate to store log files. And we can create that like so. Now, the backend we are using, like I mentioned earlier on, is PowerDNS. It has been pre-installed on the VM, but we need to just verify that it's configured correctly. To do this, we're going to cut or display the contents of the configuration file using the command. And what we are looking for actually is the gmy SQL -db name setting to make sure it's correct. This should match part of the connection, database connection string in designate.conf. And so we'll look at that later on. However, this is the correct value, PDNS, and that's what we need to verify at this point. Lastly, let's verify that PowerDNS is running and on port 53. So we issue a command like this, and we look for PDNS_server in sitting on port 53 for the local host. We can do a quick check to see if we can talk to the PowerDNS server. We get a response back, although it's the status is a server fail. So now we have we've made sure PowerDNS is up and running. Next, we will create, initialize, and synchronize the databases for Designate. And so the commands are out there, and the first one we do is to create the database. Now we're going to initialize it. Finally, we sync it. So that completes the installation for the database for Designate. Finally, we're going to initialize and sync the PowerDNS database. It was installed for us earlier on as part of the VM image, so we just need to init and sync that one at this point. That is also done. Okay. Now we've completed the installation, but we need to start up the services for Designate. Designate runs two services, the central and the API. So the commands for starting the services are the ones we have in here, and here we go. And we're going to verify that the services are up and running. So here we go. We have Designate API running, and also Designate Central. Actually, this is the API, and this is the Central running. Finally, we are going to install a Designate client and also set up Keystone for Designate. So first, the Keystone setup. We are going to set the user admin environment by sourcing this file. And then now we can create the service So that enters the information into the database, and we have a specific ID for that. Now we are going to create an endpoint. So this is telling Keystone to forward requests, to authorize requests to Designate on this local box. That completes the setup for Keystone. Finally, the client, Designate client. For that, we can cd to home vagrant Python Designate client. We're going to install requirements for the client. That takes a few, about a minute or so to get done. Okay, so that's succeeded. Finally, we're going to do a setup for the client.
And there we go. We've completed the installation of the Designate client. I'm just about done to hand off to Ron to show how Designate works. However, we need to do a quick check of the API as well as the client. The first thing we're going to do is to issue a curl command locally on the VM to see if we can talk to the API. So here is some information from the service. We're talking to it. We can also do that using an HTTP client from outside of the node, so we are not talking to it locally. I could show that here, and we got a response, authentication required. So this is Keystone intercepting the request and making sure that we do need some credentials to reach the API. Now, finally, a quick check on the client. We can do this. We CD back to the home Vagrant. We already sourced the admin, but let's just do it once more. That's okay. And we're going to issue a quick command. Okay, we have nothing, but so at this point, is this what we expected to see, a blank instead of maybe a message?
It's successfully run.
Successfully run, but we didn't see anything. There's nothing. Okay, now, I promised earlier on that I was going to touch on a few things in the configuration file. So designate.conf, and so we go back to designate, etc, designate. This is where we have the configuration file. I'm going to vim the designate.conf file. I will touch on the main sections only, and later on, Ron will show a few more details. And then there is documentation online that explains some of the entries in here. All the services that or components of Openstack that we interact with, or that Designate interacts with, have configuration in here. And so the ones I'd like to point out are, first of all, these are some of the directories that we created earlier on. They are referenced from here. We have some configuration here that says we want to be using Keystone as our authentication strategy. This is the setup, a section for the setup for the Keystone middleware. We also have a section for network API. This is SQL Alchemy, and that is configured in that section. We have Neutron, a section for Neutron, and a whole bunch of backends. So we have a section for Bind9, we have a section for Bind9 MySQL, and the section that we were interested in today is Power DNS, and as you can see, we have the configuration in here. And you see the database connection here for the MySQL database. It reflects the name of the database that we had in the other configuration file that we had to check on when we installed or when we configured the Power DNS database. So at this point, I'll hand it off to Ron to demo some of the capabilities of Designate. Thank you.
We are at 24 minutes.
Nice and smooth.
Yep.
Well, I think that was much shorter than last time. I think it was 40 last time with the same content.
Hey guys, we just realized we were muted for some time, so anything that you may have said while Emmanuel was talking was missed.
No problem. We didn't say it. I don't think anybody said anything.
Okay.
Cool.
So, anyway, if we think the instructions that we have right now on the wiki is okay, which is exactly what I walked through, I would just copy those, put them into Packer, and it will show up as home vagrant install.txt, just in case we don't have access to internet. We still are able to copy and paste and do as we want. We just did.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
I was going to suggest, I was going to run through it and try and remove as many of the sudos as possible. I think I know why you have to use all the designate stuff as being required to be root, but so I was planning on doing that tomorrow, or yeah, I was planning on doing it tomorrow. I just won't have time tonight.
Okay.
But other than that, the instructions look perfect.
I noticed one thing.
Okay.
The Python client, you
Yes.
still had to download.
The client.
It looked like they were downloading when you were.
Oh, we were installing the requirements for that.
Right.
The prerequisites for that, yes, and that had to download a few things. Although I think some of the requirements were already there based upon the installation of the Designate itself.
Did it actually? I was looking at my own slides at that point. Did it actually download anything, or did it just list through them and install them? They should be pre-installed.
Yes, I think
I thought I saw download.
installing. It mentioned some installing here. So, for instance,
You get to go higher.
I got to go
right up to the top.
Yeah, it's way up there.
Oh, so
There.
which one is this?
That's
Okay,
it.
keep going up a little bit more. That looks like it's actually installing them to me, which is wrong. They should be getting installed during the image build.
So I noticed that a couple of days ago, and I put that in the IRC, but I don't know if I thought I was doing something wrong.
Look, downloading and unpacking.
How would it do this anyways if you're running this as the vagrant user, not the root user?
Well, all of those should be already installed, so we shouldn't actually need. So for the setup PyDevelop, we should need root, but all of the config files and help and so on, and all the files are kept in a vagrant user directory. So if you're doing root, you end up in the wrong place. Files will get owned by all sorts of things, by the wrong user, if you get me, and you'll end up back in the vagrant user wondering why you're getting permission denied. So ideally we avoid it. I'll have a look through it after this. Hopefully we can figure out why it downloaded.
Okay. So once you've taken a look at it, I'll go back and try the whole thing again to make sure that we all agree on the steps.
Yeah, I had a couple notes here. I think in one of the slides you mentioned that we're installing PowerDNS, and I don't think that's correct. Well, I know that's not correct. I also still don't understand why we even bother looking at the PowerDNS config file, since that's not really part of installing Designate. We just tell them PowerDNS has been installed. So I don't know why we have to go through the steps to look to see if it's running and configured properly. And then the final thing was when you're running those designate commands to create the database, it might be a good idea to show them the log file just so they understand if something goes wrong where they need to look.
Okay, so this will be the syslog files, you mean?
The designate manage.log file. If it were me, all we have to do about PowerDNS is say it's installed. You still have steps in here that show them, oh, and here's the config, and here's the. I don't know why we would do that.
Well,
because their back end could be bind, it could be anything. So we're just showing them how to install Designate. That was one. That was just a comment. We're not installing PowerDNS for them. One of the slides says we are installing PowerDNS.
Which slide is that?
Let me get back to it. Hang on.
No, we're just configuring it. It was.
Oh yeah, you're running.
But we're not doing that either. I'm sorry, you're right. It says configure, but we're not doing that. We're not configuring PowerDNS backend. We're using
not.
Well, it's already configured, right? Okay, never mind. You can leave it like that. I guess I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing it out because when they go to install this, they're going to be going, okay, it doesn't work. I query PowerDNS and I'm getting an NX domain. It doesn't exist. to point, even if it's only very briefly showing them that they have to configure something in PowerDNS to point at the database that Designate is managing, I think that's worth showing.
So that connection, which in the end, when I open up the configuration file, I did quickly point out that this is what matches this. So hopefully that is something that will help them out.
But Kyle, I guess if you took that to its logical conclusion, you would have to also show them what you did for Keystone, Nova, Neutron, DNS Mask, and everything else that you pre-installed for them.
I think there's, I think that's taking it to the absolute limit versus the bare minimum. I think, Designate on its own, none of that other stuff is needed, but a DNS server is. We're using PowerDNS. I think it makes sense to just show that one file, highlight that you're going to have to do something at your DNS server, and move on.
Oh, okay, that's fine. MySQL too?
No, I don't think we need to show them any of that.
Okay, so we're saying that we can just leave the PowerDNS the way, the instruction set the way it is.
That's fine.
I don't think it took too much time to do that, but
what about the database portion that Ron brings up, the MySQL bits?
Which one is that? This one? Ron, you mentioned something about database installation?
Yeah. When you run those commands, those designate, manage, install,
yes.
You probably should show them the log files.
Okay.
Just because if there's a problem, that's where they're going to need to look.
That's actually a really great point, preempting problems by giving them the information to bug it themselves. Here's where all the log files are going to end up, and the useful ones for different types of errors are.
Okay. Now, in the end, when I ran the client command, nothing showed up. Was that the right response? When I said designate debug server list, I know we turned down some config file, some config information in designate, config setting to not put things on standard error or standard out, something like that.
So that is the right answer, unless you create one of the servers, which will happen in the next bit of the talk. It will be empty and won't have any servers. So that's actually the right output in this case, even if we should have the designate client saying, no results or something.
Yes. Okay. So I do have some talking points, and I was looking over it, but I don't think I did a good job looking at all of it. But I'll clean it up and have it somewhere, a hard copy or wherever in the presentation. If we have two laptops to use, one for the talking points and the other one for what we show. But
okay, so real quick, if you guys look at the log, there is a log in there that the users may ask about.
Which one is that? Tell us what the log is.
Well, look at the only log that you have will be the designate manage log right now because it's the only thing you've done. Well, no, that's not true. You ran a client. But anyways, go to the designate manage log.
Should be bar log designate, unless we changed it in this. I can't remember.
Okay. We did.
CD dot / log.
Oh yeah, you're go up 2 folders first and then CD into the log folder.
Yeah, okay. Look at the manage log. I don't know if Tail's going to get what you need, but go ahead, try it.
So, okay.
That'll work.
Really?
-n. Okay.
Okay, so there's a message, a warning in there at the bottom.
I see it.
Yeah, not only does it have the wrong database, because our database is named PDNS, but is that something that the user needs to be concerned about?
I don't see it yet.
I need to be concerned about. at one point, I can't remember the reason the migration doesn't run that automatically, but it would only affect you if you have existing data in there. So I'll put a commit up in a couple of minutes that says if you have existing data, please run this query, and that kind of preempts it.
Okay. But other than that, I would think showing them that everything completed successfully by looking at the log would be the right thing to do. Because I tell you, the command will just return and give you nothing even if it fails, and you'll still have to look. You still have to look at the log.
So it might be worth then adding -- verbose to the designate manage commands, which will show the info level logs. So you'll end up seeing the info, the warning, and error. You won't see any of the annoying debug output.
And so, okay, so that will control how it goes to this log file, or is it going to show on the command line that we're using?
Yes, you're right.
I'll try.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think you can go. I think you can do designate manage -- use -- standard error, and it will revert to its previous behavior just for that command.
Okay, and you said it's what? Designate?
Designate manage. So I've tried it myself, but I don't have it on my laptop.
Okay.
-- use -- stderr. And then just try a database init or something. Okay, no.
No, he didn't type database in it.
No, it's...
Oh, I see, yeah.
The help there is showing all the ones that are available from the CLI, and it doesn't include that. It has use syslog, but it doesn't have use standard error. Yeah. Okay, ignore that. I tail the logs then. The recent changes to the designate manage command have changed how that works a little.
Okay, cool. So we have a little bit of cleanup to do, but I think we did okay on time this time.
Yeah, 19 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Ron, you want to pick up?
Yeah, I'll pick up.
All right. Fire at will.
Don't want to do that.
Okay, so.
Okay, so let's see. Where are we at? Did you finish all your slides too, Daniel?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we just did questions. Okay, so I will tell you guys I have everything printed out today, so I'm not going to be looking at the slides. Slides will be in the background for me. I'll be working in the foreground. So you're not going to see me. You can follow along on the slides if you want. Otherwise, you'll just watch me type. Okay. So
sounds good.
Okay. So thanks, Manuel. So we're gonna go through some of the designate operations that you can perform using the REST API and the command line utility. The pre-setup for you in Keystone on this VM are three tenants: admin, tenant A, and tenant B. The admin tenant has a user admin. The tenant A has a user 1 and a user 2, and tenant B has a user 3. Those are there to help make this demo go a little bit smoother, and you guys don't have to create those accounts or anything. Also, we have some scripts in the home directory for Vagrant. These scripts are here to allow you to switch between the different users in your environment, but also I have some examples of the REST API scripts specifically around creating, deleting, and listing servers. Okay. So first thing we're going to want to do is let's go ahead and show you how the REST API works, what you can do with the REST API. We're not going to go into an exhaustive list of things that you can do with the REST API, just enough to get a feel for what it is. And and then we're going to switch over to using the Designate client because it'll be much easier for you to use that specifically for the basic operations within Designate. When you're creating servers and deleting servers, you're adding and deleting domains, you're adding and deleting records. So
Hey,
we're
Ron?
going to, yeah.
I'm sorry, just one comment. What I was going to say is that right now, I know you have your terminal window open and it's covering the presentation. When you actually get up there, I don't know that we're going to have two screens. So, you know.
That's a good point. We'll have two for ourselves. We could have two for ourselves, but there'll only be one projector.
I mean, you may just want to alt-tab a lot, or just, you know, it's just something to be mindful of, because if you're speaking to the slides, nobody can see the slides because you're covering it with the terminal.
That's a good point. Didn't think about that. Okay, let's. Good point. I get you. So we'll flip back and forth then. The problem is, as you saw last time I did this, when I was flipping back and forth, I advanced the slide and I didn't mean to, and I had to go back, and it was just kind of a pain in the butt. But I'll go ahead and keep the slides current with what we're doing. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to use the REST API. I'm going to show you how, using the REST API, we can go ahead and list the servers and create servers. Now, it's important to note that at this point, when we're talking about servers, we're really talking about the NS records that will go into your domain, and also the first record will also become the primary domain server in your SOA record. Finally, when we create this server, the only thing it's going to do is it's going to make changes to the Designate database. There is actually no domain for it to do anything with, so it's not going to do anything with the back end at this point. When we get to creating a domain, then it'll actually use this data and use it in the back end, and we'll show you that. So let's source the OpenRC admin. We're going to run a select env.sh, and actually let me explain what select env does. So what I've done is I've written some scripts here which are going to allow you to use the environment variables that are created by the open source openrc.admin. It'll use those environment variables to get you a user token. Let's go ahead and echo the token just to show you. So there's your token. You just got a user token. Anytime you interact with Designate via the REST API, you need to pass it a valid token. So let's go ahead and list servers. Okay, so right now we have no servers available. So let's look at the list server script. So looking at the script, we're using curl. It's very simple. We're calling the REST API for Designate, and we're telling it to give us the list of servers. And you can see here where we're passing the token in. So, okay, I have a couple of other scripts here as well. So we have a create one, and this create server script we're going to use to create a server, and you can see that all we have to do is pass it a name as an argument, and that name will become the payload for this creation. And then finally we have a delete server script, which we're not actually going to get to run here today, but I left it in as informational. Again, you're passing the token, and in this case we're going to give it a ID of that server, and that would allow you to delete that server. So let's go ahead and create the server. Okay. So at this point, we've updated the Designate database. It's created an entry for a server. That server's name is ns.example.net. When we actually go to create the domain, this server will become an NS record for that domain, or any domains that you create for that matter, and it'll also become the primary DNS record inside of the SOA. I'm sorry, become the primary DNS server inside the SOA record. So, okay, let's go ahead and list these servers real quick. And then there we go. That's the server that we just created. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on the REST API. Let's go ahead and get into the Designate client, which is a very useful way to interact with Designate and do these kinds of operations. So what we're going to do here is we're going to source the OpenRC. We're going to become admin again. I'm going to show you how to list. Then we're going to go ahead and delete the original. We're going to create a new server. We're going to create the original, delete the original server. We'll go ahead and delete the new server we create, and then we'll show you a little bit more that you can do with the Designate client. So. Okay, so as you see, we have the server there that we created earlier that I showed you with the REST API. We're going to go ahead and create a new one. Yep. We're going to create it, not list it. Okay, so we have the new server created. If I do my list, you'll see that we have the two servers that are created now. So if we were to actually create a domain at this point, both of these would become NS records in that domain or any other domain we create in the future. Let's go ahead and delete the original server, and we have to pass it the ID. And then let's list. And you'll see we have the new one. So I do want to point out that when you cannot delete the last server, so as soon as you create a server, that server is there. If you create a new one, you can delete that one, but you can't delete the last server. We'll show you that you can't do that. Okay, so it tells you here that you're not allowed to delete the last server. Finally, if you don't want to have to type out designate on every single command you do, Designate does have an interactive shell that you can use. All you have to do is type the word designate, and that takes you into the shell. You can look at all the different commands, and you can see the commands that we just ran here, like server list, still here. And you'll see me throughout this presentation kind of flip back between running designate commands and then running designate shell and then running the commands. So, okay, so that's it for what you can do with. You can also do updates with servers, but we're not going to go into that. Let's go ahead and flip over to looking at what we can do with domains. Get a little bit more interesting now, because now when we go and create domains, we're actually going to be doing. Not only will it update the Designate database, the storage, but it's also going to create the domain for you using your backend, which in our case is PowerDNS. And we can actually show you a little bit about what's happening there. So let's go ahead and get out of this. So all of your server commands are going to be done as the admin. In this case, we're going to create the domains using an actual user now. So we're going to do a source openrc.user1. Let's go ahead and list the domains that we have. And not unexpectedly here, we have no domains. This is a brand new install. We haven't done anything here yet. Let's go ahead and create our first domain. We'll call it example.com to match our server, our NS record that we've created earlier, that we will create. Okay, so here we've actually created a domain. So not only will it have updated the Designate database, which I'm showing you here, so there's our domain, but it also updates our backend as well. So dig localhost. And let's first look at the SOA record for that domain. So you can see here we have an SOA record, example.com. There's our primary DNS server, which not surprisingly matches the server that we created earlier. And if you want to list the the name servers as well, we can do that. So let's go. So, and there's the name server. So if we, at this point, if we create any more servers, they will become name servers for this domain and any other domains that we create in the future. So now I'm going to show you that that any user that's in this tenant, because remember earlier we talked about, or maybe we didn't mention this, but domains are owned by tenants. So to show you that, the user 1 is in tenant A, user 2 is also in tenant A. So I'm going to show you that if we actually change our environment to be the user 2, that it also will be able to show the domain. So okay. So not surprisingly, user 2 sees the example.com domain. Now, as you would expect, if I log in as user 3 and I list the domain, it doesn't see it. So, okay, real quick, I'm going to show you how to delete a domain. We're going to go ahead and create one here using user 3. So we're going to do a designate domain create, and we'll call it test.com. So we'll list it real quick, and then I'll show you. You can just delete it. Oh, if you want, you can do your dig, and we can look at test.com also, and you can see that record there. And not surprisingly, the as I mentioned before, all the servers are not only the name servers, but the server that we have in there is also the primary DNS for that SOA record. Let's go ahead and delete that. And we have to give it the ID that we just created. And that's deleted. Okay, so I showed you how to add, list, and delete servers. I showed you how to add, list, and delete domains. Now we're going to move to adding, listing, and deleting records. So let's go ahead and change back to one of the users that are in tenant A. Let's go ahead and list our domains. Now the domain ID is needed when you create a record. So let's go ahead and create our first record. Well, let's list our records first, then we'll create our first record. Let's list all the records that are in here, and not surprisingly, there isn't going to be any records. DNS records are not going to be here. They're actually special. They're in that server list that we showed you earlier. So we'll go ahead and do it. Designate record create, and we'll call this server A. Well, example.com. Create an A record. We'll give it some goofy data. And I forgot to, and this is important, because again, the reason I keep pointing this out to you guys is because I keep forgetting it myself, and I do this all the time. But you have to give it the domain ID, because you're telling it where you're creating that record, what domain you're creating that record for. Even though you have the fully qualified name for this record here, you still have to give it the domain ID. So designate record list, and then again record ID, and then there you go. You see we created an A record. If you go ahead and look in the back end, we're going to run this command. We'll look on the back end for that record, and then you'll see that record exists in Power DNS. Okay, and there it is. Okay. Just like domains just like the domains can be seen by any user in that tenant, records are the same way. So let's go ahead and switch over to another user in the tenant A, user 1. We'll list our records in that domain, and not surprisingly, we can see that A record. Let's go ahead and switch over to user 3. Let's go ahead and list the records for user 3. And in this case, it gives you a domain not found because it doesn't even see that domain. But trust me, it kind of shows you that you can't list the records for that domain either. So while we're here in go flip back to user 1. It's a different user than the user that created the A record, and we'll go ahead and delete the A record. Yeah, and in this case, let's go ahead and do a record list, because I'm going to need both. Let's do a domain list. Let's do a record list. And then let's go ahead and delete that record now. So we'll do a record delete, and we need to delete it out of this domain, and we need to delete this record. Okay, and now if we do our record list on that domain, you'll see that the record has been deleted. Okay, so the record's deleted. Are there any questions about the basic DNS operations that we can perform? Anybody? Okay. If not, we'll go ahead and move on.
Other than highlighting just how much.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kyle.
I was going to say, other than highlighting the need to not require IDs on the command line, we're going to have to fix that.
You mean having to put in all these IDs all the time?
yeah, it's painful. I know.
A little bit, but I'm used to doing it 2 or 3 times before I get it right. And the other one is when you delete a record. Many times I'll put the record ID first and then the domain ID, and that doesn't work either. So
we'll fix it soon enough, I guess.
Okay. So
hey Ron, time check 43 minutes 30 seconds.
For me?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh.
The total running time where we're at. So
okay.
You've got about 9 minutes. You started. Oh. You completed 9 minutes more or less. Or
okay, perfect. So
20 minutes. I'm sorry. 20 minutes. My bad.
Okay. I'm gonna move on now to the demoing Designate Sync, and specifically the notification handlers that ship with Designate. So.
Cool.
Who put this slide here? Sorry, I haven't seen this slide. Okay, so what we're going to talk about next is, or what we're going to demo next for you, is how Designate Sync works. As was mentioned, you know, in the earlier presentation, maybe even earlier in this presentation, the Designate Sync interfaces with Nova and Neutron. You do that via a custom notification handler. So what's important about to understand about Designate Syncs is it consumes notification events. It was geared towards consuming notification events from Nova and Neutron, but it could also be consume events from other services as well. Designate Sync will turn those events into DNS operations. So, for example, most of you will, will do a VM create or a VM delete, and you'll want Designate to be able to add and delete pointer records. This is where the custom notification handlers come into play. There are 2 that ship with Designate. There's a Nova custom notification handler, and there's a Neutron notification handler. The Nova one handles VM creation and deletion. The Neutron custom notification handler handles floating IP, I guess, creation and deletions. Most of you will probably not use the custom notification handlers. They're here as examples for you, but you will probably end up writing your own. With that said, we will go ahead and demo the Nova custom notification handler for you, but we will set them both up, but we will demo the Nova one. So what you need to do to enable the notifications from Nova to be picked up by Designate Sync is you'll need to make some changes to your Nova conf file. We'll go ahead and publish them on the monitor topic, and you need to tell Nova that you want notifications to be sent whenever VM and task states have changed. So whenever the state of a VM has changed, so for example, you create a VM, that's a state change, you want this notification to be sent. If a delete occurs, you want the notification to be sent. So this configuration here in NovaConf will do that for you. For Neutron, a little bit simpler. You don't have to tell it about VM state change. You don't have to tell it to worry about VM state changes. You just have to tell it which driver to use, and you give it the same notification topic. This topic will be the topic that we will configure Designate to listen on. Next, we want to enable Designate sync in Designate conf, and we'll go ahead and do that for you right now. So let's go into Designate, etc. Designate. Let's go ahead and BI our designate.conf file. That's what I thought. Guys, I apologize. Pause here real quick. I hadn't realized you had done all that work with making things work as Vagrant. So I had done everything as root like we were the last slide. So this is one thing I need to fix real quick. Is just let me change the permissions on this so that we can keep the users working as this is something that we wouldn't see. I wouldn't have done this, but okay. So back to this. Okay, so let's go ahead and enable sync. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on the notification handler, the two default notification handlers. We're going to turn on the Nova Fix notification default notification handler. We're going to turn on the Neutron floating IP notification handler. We do that there. Let's go ahead and enable the Nova one first. So a little bit further down in here, we got the Nova Fixed one. We're going to take we're going to uncomment these three lines. It's important to note here as we're going through this that the format can change. This is going to be the fully qualified name of the A record that this handler adds, and that's the only thing that this handler does is it listens for VM creation and deletion and it adds and deletes A records. It doesn't do anything with pointer records, but you can change how that A record looks. If you wanted to use the octets from the IP address for that A record, you can use that in the fully qualified domain name. In this case, we're going to use the display name. You'll notice here that we have a domain ID, and we needed to give it the domain ID. Since we have example.com set up, let's go ahead and use the domain ID for example.com. So we'll do our designate domain list. The commands that you saw from the previous section, we'll go ahead and capture that ID, and let's go ahead and add that ID here. Okay. So that enables Nova. Let's do now. What we want to do is we want to enable the Neutron custom notification handler. In order to do that, we need to tell the system that the default network API is Neutron. This is basically enabling the interface between Designate and Neutron itself. The integration between those two pieces. There is an API inside of Designate, and if you had attended our earlier deep dive presentation, and Graham talked to this point, but there is a interface between Designate and Neutron, which allows you to look at the floating IPs and do things with floating IPs. Well, this is going to actually enable that integration, which is going to be needed by the Neutron custom notification handler. So let's go ahead and enable all that real quick. And that's up here. And turn that all on. We're not going to do anything with the certificates, so you can leave that off for now. And we need to tell it that it'll do it by default, but let's go ahead and uncomment that and tell it to do that. Next slide. We'll go ahead and also enable that Neutron custom notification handler. So let's go in here, and while we're in here, let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and take out that line. Let's replace it with this line. And then, so both the Nova custom notification handler and the Neutron custom notification handler are going to be using the same domain, example.com. We're not actually going to demo the Neutron custom notification handler today, but I do also want to point out, in addition to listening for notifications on the monitor topic, specifically the exchange that we're looking for in the messaging system for Neutron is Neutron, and the exchange that Nova is using is Nova. Okay, let's go ahead and get out of this. Oops. Okay, let's go ahead. Because we made changes that impact specifically Designate Central, let's go ahead and cycle the services that we already have running, and then we'll go ahead and start up sync as well. So let's do a sudo kill all designate API. We'll do a sudo kill all designate central. Do a PS. You'll see that we have no designate services running anymore. Let's go ahead and start them up. And we'll start up our API. And finally, the new service that we're going to be starting up is Designate Sync. Okay, and we have all three of them running: Central, API, and Sync. Okay, let's go ahead and create a VM real quick and delete the VM just to show you how this how the default handler works. And again, can't emphasize enough, this will probably be this will be code that you guys will be writing. Very important piece of Designate. These are just examples on how to write your handler. So let's do this as the user1 user, which is one of the users in tenant A, which owns the example.com domain. Let's do a Nova image list. So give us a list of all the images that are available for us for our VMs. Let's do a Nova flavor list. We're going to want to pick the smallest flavor, which is usually the first one. And in this case it is. And then we'll go ahead and create our VM at this point. So let's do a Nova boot. We'll call it test VM. We'll do image. Grab the ID for the image. Oops, that was a little bit premature. That's okay. Just redo that. And let's do our flavor. So here the image is getting created. And assuming everything goes well, we should see this come up quickly. It did. It got assigned an IP address. Its name is test VM. This corresponds to the display name that I showed you earlier in the config file. So if we looked at Designate's database at this point, let's go ahead and look at that. Let's get that domain again. If we look at the records in the database for that domain, we should see an A record in here with that IP address. And there it is, testvm example.com. That's the fully qualified domain name for that, and then the IP address. And not surprisingly, we'll go ahead and look at the back end, and we'll look for testvm.example.com, and you'll see there that record got created in the back end. So VM creation, we now have automated the creation of an A record whenever the VM's created. Let's show you that record also gets deleted when it's removed, when the VM is removed. So we'll do a Nova delete, test VM, look at our list. Okay, the VM's gone. So let's verify that the records have also been removed. So let's go ahead and do our list the record in the Designate database. Record's gone, not surprisingly, and then the back end will have been updated as well. So the A record should be removed from the back end. And you'll see there that there's no A record. So didn't respond with it. So at this point, I've shown you that the custom notification handlers are there for you guys to modify and do whatever you need to do with based on notification events that are coming out of Nova and Neutron. So are there any questions? Okay. If there are no questions, I am now going to turn the floor over to our esteemed leader, Kyle, who is going to talk to you guys about how you can join this happy group of people and help contribute.
So I clocked you at 12 minutes there.
No,
22. Gosh, darn it.
Total or?
No. So it was.
Before you left, he was around 20. So.
Well, let me double check. No, because I started in. So on the operating section, you were 18 minutes, and then on the sync section, you were 12 minutes. So a total of 30 minutes.
Okay. Do you need it shorter
or? Well, why don't we talk about timing here in a little bit? Because I have some thoughts, but I think we should get through the whole thing and then circle back.
I think Kyle is trying to talk about.
Kyle?
Yeah. Okay.
It's all you, Ed.
All right. So thank you, Ron. So I'm sharing my screen if you guys can see it. Yeah. I'm going to assume that's a yes, you can see it.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So first off, I'm going to bombard you with links. Yes, these will all be published online. If you're interested in contributing to Designate, to Openstack or Designate itself, reading up on each of these will help you along. Designate follows the Openstack development model as closely as possible. This includes using the GER code review system, Launchpad for bugs and blueprints, and the requirement to sign the Openstack contributor license agreement. Once you're all set up with these, you'll be ready to start contributing. The first and most important tool you use to contribute to Designate is an IRC client. The Designate team is almost always on hand to discuss ideas, bugs, features in the OpenStack DNS room. Getting involved in here and talking to the team will help keep your contributions on track and moving. We hold weekly IRC meetings on Wednesday at 1700 UTC in the OpenStack meeting room, occasionally replaced by a Google Hangout video call. The agenda is open for all to edit, so if you have anything to discuss, please go ahead and add it to the wiki page, join the meeting. Finally, if you've never used Git, you're going to need to forget everything GitHub taught you about Git. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Designate has been built to be as flexible as possible with plugin interfaces everywhere they make sense. We currently provide plugin interfaces for the V1 API, storage drivers with the default being SQL Alchemy, backend drivers with options for PowerDNS, Bind, Red Hat's Free IPA, Dynect, and finally, sync notification handlers. Designate currently has two APIs. This isn't reading as well as I thought it did in my head, but okay. Designate currently has two APIs, the stable version 1 API and the experimental version 2 API. Version 1 is built on the Flask framework, while version 2 is built on the Pecan framework. Designate's API layer is intentionally isolated from Designate Central, as this allows for building multiple interfaces to our data. We've got an effort in progress to build mini-DNS, a micro-DNS server intended to serve zone data to the public DNS servers via zone transfers. In the future, we'll add support for modifying domains and records using RFC-style dynamic DNS. API version 2 is experimental and ever-changing. We're hoping to finalize it during this cycle. Finally, Designate Central is our core service. The HTTP and DNS APIs interact with the service via AMQP. If you're not sure where something belongs, it's probably in here. All the other services, API, mini-DNS, sync, are intended to be lightweight wrappers, providing an interface into Central. Designate API provides the HTTP interface. Designate Sync provides the AMQP interface. We genuinely try and keep these doing as little as possible and only doing what's specific to their interface. And that's it. I really hope you enjoyed this workshop, and thanks to my co-presenters Joe, Emmanuel, Ron, and our helpers Vinod, Betsy, and Rich. God, if I did that right, it would be helpful. Questions?
Cool.
And great.
That was lightning fast, man.
So,
yeah.
Yes, Kyle.
Yeah.
So, that was very good information, but I can tell you were reading.
I'm an awful presenter. I'll put it that way.
No.
Yeah.
If you just slow it down a little bit, that will.
Yeah. I mean, on the day I don't plan on reading. Let's put it that way. I do plan on trying to get this off. But so hopefully that will make it sound a little bit less like reading versus today, which really was reading. So yeah.
I have a small suggestion along those lines. If you do plan to say a lot, then you may want to minimize how much you actually have in the bullets. Because what gets challenged, if there's a lot of text in the bullet, and you're saying a lot of things that aren't exactly what's in the bullet, then the reader gets confused as to whether they should listen to you or as to whether they should read the bullet.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, all of the bullets and so on that are on the page, I think I hit all of those points while talking about it without reading them.
Right, but it wasn't like a word for word thing. There's like a variation between what you said and what was in the bullets that it caused a little confusion. And maybe if you just slowed it down, it would probably ease that.
Yeah, okay, I'll do both of those, slow it down a bit and try and sync them back up a little bit more than...
Maybe if you're not as verbose in the bullet points, the bullet points just being very, very rough outline, and then as you're speaking you expand on them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, stuff like the third point about the IRC meeting, for example, can be said. Want to discuss something, don't have permission, you can say that rather than read the have it on the screen at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That is good. Although if you get me on the day, I'll punch you.
All right, any other comments?
You know,
I kind of like. I'll be honest. I like the bullet points because they're Kyle's personality. So I didn't have as much of a problem with that as I thought. It kind of his personality comes through in his particular slides.
Yes. So you see, I think what both Graham and Joe were saying is that if Kyle were not reading, then he would have picked up just some keywords from the slide and use those to talk to the slide, and then people will follow along. But when he was reading his notes, the notes were just as detailed as what was on the slide, and so it was hard to follow both. And so since Kyle is not going to read his notes when he presents, I would say just a slight cleanup of the slide would be fine. And
yeah, I totally get Joe's comment there about them being out of sync. And when you're reading something using one phrasing and hearing it using another, it's gonna confuse you a little bit. So you're absolutely right that I should sync those back up a little bit so that they're closer to the same thing, and maybe reduce a little bit of the content in the bullets and speak to it instead.
Hey, Kyle, yesterday, or I'm sorry, Monday, when we did this, you weren't reading straight from your notes, right?
On Monday? No, I made that up as I went along, to be honest.
Yeah, because you know what?
I
thought you did really well then. Yeah. In fact,
Putting on a stage in front of 40, 50 people and making things up as I go along doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I know what you mean. Okay. All right. I noticed that. I mean, you said you were a little cautious about speaking, and I think you're a pretty decent speaker on Monday, at least in front of 10 people.
Yeah, so no, I'll definitely take both of those into account and work to see if I can clean these up a little bit and clean up the notes so that it doesn't, so that they're not so fast, they're not so out of sync, and obviously memorize them, if you get me, memorize all the points so that I'm not actually reading.
All right. Well, does anybody else have any other thoughts about this section of the presentation, the contributing portion? or questions? Okay, because I have some thoughts about the timing of the entire workshop, and I pasted all of the different times that folks took at the bottom of the Designated Atlanta workshop Etherpad. So if you guys want to follow along with me there, great. Otherwise, I'll read through it and just comment. Overall, I mean, we rocked this thing, right? You guys we came in at under 30 minutes right now without questions and without interruptions. And right now, my biggest worry.
Yeah. So on the day I can.
What?
Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say my biggest worry right now is that we're going too fast.
Come on.
So just, I mean, you guys have been I'm sure you've been in a classroom or something where the instructor is going along and says, all right, paste this command, now this command, now this command, and it rarely goes as fast as it went with this round. You know, like I can tell you right now, Emmanuel, it's going to go slower the day you go, and it's because there are going to be issues and there's going to be questions, and Ron, definitely for your section, I think it's going to go a lot slower. So I guess the bigger question I have is, do we need to cut content?
The presentation is 90, and we have what?
It took an hour.
45, 55, 60. We basically have an hour, yeah. So that leaves 30 minutes for slowdowns, which is a good chunk of time, to be honest.
I like all the content.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We could probably get confident in
I think, like...
to make sure that everybody gets something. No, what I was saying was we could probably do a time check at the actual presentation, have somebody do the time check, and if some part in between is taking too long, then we could probably try to cut short that instead of trying to cut short the slides ahead of time itself.
Yeah, I mean, like, at the end of each section, most likely people won't be complete. So it isn't time to move on to the next thing. So taking a 5-minute break in the presentation where, you know, where you just leave it at the question slide and spend 5 minutes letting everybody catch up, you know, that would probably help keep everybody on track, everybody at the same place.
I also think, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
As far as the VM staff, if we, ahead of time, try to get people to prepare that even before they come in, that would probably help also, because that is where, you know, we equalize. Some people have slower machines, maybe some have, well, I guess if you're copying from USB, there's not going to be too much of a difference. But maybe that's one thing we can do, and I don't know how best we can do that. Once we know who is coming, at some point we publish some information and say, hey, if possible, download this to your machine. Yeah. It is the box that we're going to use, something like that.
Yeah, we definitely need that.
I'm not even sure we can, to be honest. I don't know where we can publish that information, where people are actually going to see it.
Okay.
I mean, there's a shared site, but I don't think we can actually update that. We might be able to ask them.
We can get it updated, no problem.
Or in the preceding presentations,
That's what I mentioned.
we make a note and tell them, go here and download this if you are coming to the workshop.
And I also thought in the summit page where we listed, I don't know if you can put in additional information. It actually lists a presentation, if you can add information.
Yeah, those are great ideas. So basically, I'm capturing some action items. Can we add a slide to the deep dive presentation to get requirements? Then the next one, well, and we're going to have these design sessions, so we can mention it, you know. Remember to install dependencies. And then, Graham, you mentioned something, and I couldn't really hear what you said.
Was it about the shed? We should be able to get the shed updated easy enough. Beth Novak, the woman I was emailing before, I think she can get the information on that page updated. So if we want to get the content together, I can just send her an email asking her to change it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And that'll capture any new people probably that come to sign up, as well as anybody that goes and sees it in the interim. And I'm wondering if that... Go ahead, Rich.
Ron, what's the concern? I'm sorry, I'm not even... I lost track of where you guys are talking about.
It was about trying to reduce the length of time. You know, people arrive without Vagrant or VirtualBox installed, and wasting 15 minutes or something of the time waiting for that. So trying to get the word out in advance.
I gotcha.
And so I'm going to add another one here to ask Beth to give us the emails of the people attending, because that would be ideal, just broadcast an email beforehand. I had also, by the way, I got all the USB drives, and I got the stickers. So thankfully those dependencies are out of the way. But what I was going to do,
This would be the ideal.
I downloaded all the install packages for Vagrant, and I was going to drop those on the USB drive too, as well as, if I can, get copies of VirtualBox.
Yeah, that makes sense. We can get those on the... If there's space for them on the drive, then great. I mean, avoid people having to download them if they don't have them installed.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So it sounds like we're gonna keep to our current times, and just to make sure we're all on the same page, I think we said that Emmanuel's got 20 minutes. Ron, you took 30 minutes, and I just put yours together, so operating plus sync. Yeah, in 5 minutes, basically you'll have the remainder of the time. So we just got to make sure we at least give Kyle his 5 minutes.
I'd be more than happy to stand up and say, "Oh, we're out of time. Sorry."
No way.
Nice, nice. Okay. The only other thought I had was that there's probably going to be people that maybe aren't interested in the moment of in walking through each step to do the install, right? Because that's kind of, you set it and forget it, and you never come back to it. They may be more curious about keeping up with Ron's portion, which is the operation. So my thought was that either if we could take that TXT file that you saved
and the script as
well, modify it so that you can just execute it, right, and get caught up.
Mm-hmm.
Then that would be a nice, because that way, if they do want to follow on with Ron, they can.
You mean for people who arrive late and miss the first 20 steps?
For example, or yeah, for whatever reason, they decide, oh, this is just, I don't want to keep up with running all these commands. I just want to just do it and play with the app.
Okay, I will take that action item to put it into a script.
Okay, thank you, Emmanuel.
If I fail, Kyle is always there.
Okay, and I guess just to get some action, some owners associated with these. Or,
also, I will install without being on the network to see what happens.
Yes, good idea. Graham, Ron, can one of you guys add a note to get the dependencies during the operator's presentation?
I will, yeah, I'll do that now.
Thanks, man. So design session, we can just, I'll put mine in there, but we'll remember it together. Work with Beth to update the conference page. Graham, you spoke up about that. Are you cool with taking that one, or you want me to?
Yeah, it's no problem. Just make sure we have the content exactly right, because I'd rather just send her an email with, can you change it to this, please?
Yeah, that makes sense.
True. Tell you what, since that's on my portion of the slides, I'll take this item. If that's okay with you, because it's on my slides, and I'll just wordsmith it so it makes sense. And I'll just tell her to insert it. I'll CC you so you're aware of what I'm doing.
Okay.
Ask Beth to give us the emails while I'm at it. I'll do that, and then get dependencies downloaded. I can do that since I have all the drives.
Quick question, Graham, or I'm sorry, Kyle. You're not going to change it. Are you going to leave everything running as root, or are you changing stuff so it doesn't run as root?
Well, look, I'm just worried that people will end up they'll get disconnected, they'll reconnect, they'll be the vagrant user, they'll be getting permission denied. So
okay.
To be consistent about our usage is what I'd love to try and do, which I don't have time to do it tonight. I will have time tomorrow morning before you guys wake up over in the States to try and have a look at that and see if I can change it. If I can, then the only difference would be removing sudo from a lot of the commands.
Like, for example, when you run I'm more worried about making sure my slides sync up with what you guys are doing on the install. So, for example, right now, today, I added the sudo in front of the kill. Instead of sudoing, I added the sudo and did everything as vagrant to kill all, to start central, start API, start sync. There's no reason for Designate to run as root, but we are running it as root. Now, are we going to keep that, or are we going to take that out? That's all I'm asking.
Ideally, we're not running it as root. Ideally, we're not doing only doing stuff that you physically have to do as root to try and avoid conflicts, between someone like using the vagrant user and not being allowed. Designate doesn't start because it can't read its config file because they edited it as root, but are trying to run it as vagrant. Do you get me?
Yeah, I do. Okay. I'll leave sudo out of my slides then. Well, for now, on slide 31. I'll just leave it out.
Maybe I'm worried about nothing, to be honest. Do people think it's likely that people are going to run into that? If not, then we just leave it exactly as is. Silence means a yes or a no?
Silence means we're processing. So the point of all this was to make sure that if somebody reboots their machine, they don't have the problem that Ron had, right?
No, this is different actually. This is more, if they disconnect from Vagrant, open a second shell, they've modified the config file as root. They're trying to start Designate as Vagrant, and they're getting weird permission denied errors. And
yes.
Do people think that's going to be an issue? If not, we're going to leave it exactly as is and not change anything because it works.
Well, there's no sudo in the install at all, right? I mean, if you look at the commands, we're running them all as Vagrant with a couple of exceptions, right?
During the image build.
Right. But then when we go to kick, then we kick everything off as sudo. I'm open. Just let me know so I can change slide 31 to match whatever you guys are doing.
Okay. Unless somebody else agrees that they think that's going to be an issue, we're not going to change it. We're going to leave it leave it exactly as is.
Okay.
I think the simple one. So
I'll add sudos in front of all my commands then.
So just to complete that, should we go back and just put a sudo at the top of my install instructions and not put sudo in front of the specific ones, or just leave it the way it is right now?
Leave it the way it is.
The less we change, the better. We know that works. We know those series of steps work. So yeah, we can leave them, I think.
Cool. So we are frozen, almost frozen at this point.
Yes, other than having a look at the issue Ron found with rebooting it. That's it. And even then, if we can't fix that, I don't see it as being the end of the world. If somebody has to open the GUI and hit enter.
So at this point, by tomorrow afternoon, we can freeze everything, make a copy of the box, and start putting them on USB.
Yeah, I already blocked off some of my calendar tomorrow to start doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can. We talked about doing the final build, tonight, uploading it, all of us trying it, again ourselves with our own steps, with blah blah blah, just to make sure it's good. And then once we're all happy our steps work on it, then at that point we can put it on the keys.
I hope nobody's going to change anything, because I have to go through every step. And it's very time consuming.
Okay, so why don't
you not change anything?
We'll build right now. Okay, we'll upload it so that everyone's using the exact same download. Then Emmanuel will run through his steps on it. Once he says it works perfectly, then you run through his, and then run through yours, and that way his aren't going to change again on you. And then once you have said yes, then we should be good to start putting it on keys.
Okay, so one more time.
one more time. It can't hurt to practice one extra go.
Oh man, I've done this probably 20 times already this week.
You know it off by Mars now.
It's in your dreams.
Okay, I will do that build now in the next 15 minutes and upload it, which means it'll probably be up in about an hour. Once it's up, we can then everyone can download it and work at it to make sure it works. Sound good?
You're just going to put the box up there?
Yeah, so I'll just do one build so that it's, if we all just do a build with the latest stuff, God only knows if it ends up slightly different or not. So by putting one up there, that's the final image, byte for byte, what's going to go on the USB key, then, and testing with that's the best idea.
Kyle, I need to check in the install.txt.
Your instructions, yes.
Yes, and also maybe a script to run all the instructions in just one script instead of...
Okay, so do you want to put those in and then you do the final build, upload it to, Rackspace Cloud Files or something that we can all get to, rather than me?
Okay. Is there anything special to the build, or do I just do the build on my box like I do it and copy the .box file over, that directory over?
It's just the .box file, that's it, and no, there's nothing special, it's just having one image byte for byte, what we're going to hand people so that we can actually do a proper test.
I think we'll need the Vagrant file and the .box.
We will. On the USB key, we'll need that.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so I'll do that.
Okay. All right. So Emmanuel's going to create the new build, and then we need to hear from Ron once that is uploaded. That it's good.
Yep.
That you're good with it, right, Ron?
Yeah.
And you could probably just use the script that Emmanuel... I'm not sure what you do to prep it.
Yeah, I'll use the script because that'll save me 20 minutes.
Cool. Okay.
And then I'll run through mine. Who's bringing the laptop and the slides on their laptop when we get to Atlanta? Are we going to figure that all out next week?
I scheduled, I think on Tuesday, some time for us to get together. and I'm figuring probably we can make that decision then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I scheduled it for Wednesday. I think I might try to move that forward.
Back.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we're going to be fairly busy on Tuesday and Monday as well.
Yeah.
Because Monday is looking like that talk with the guy from Neutron and the guy from Nova about integration. That's looking like it's going to happen on Monday.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe I'll just try to move the workshop walkthrough to earlier in the day.
Yeah.
Some time to pick stuff if anything comes up.
One quick question: what is the desired permissions on those two files, the Vagrant file and the box file? Should it all be just like rewrite, execute for everybody, or rewrite?
May as well.
Well, the USB key will be, a Windows format key, FAST32 or whatever it's called key. So it doesn't even have those permissions.
Okay. All right.
Good question.
All right.
Okay. So, Emmanuel, do you want to drop a link to the box once you've made your final changes and uploaded it somewhere into the Designate chat room?
Yes. I'll keep you all posted.
Cool.
Or email. Maybe email's better in case not everybody's in the IRC.
Okay.
Both.
Both.
Yeah. Broadcast it out.
And then sometime tonight when I see it, I'll go ahead and go through my stuff, and I'll send out email and also on the chat, let everybody know where we're at, and that you guys can take the image. Or not, depending on if there's problems.
All right.
All right.
I guess we're done. Man, I'm amazed we actually got it done all in this window. Good job, everybody.
Well, we kept making the windows larger and larger. We went from the first one being half an hour or something, the next one being an hour, and this being 2.5.
Yeah, I guess so. We learned. But I mean, it looked pretty smooth. I think maybe the transitions were okay too. I think we can get the transitions down when we all come together. Because that's just a minor thing, but.
By that you mean a hand off to this?
Yes.
And thank you this. And
exactly.
Then you go on.
I think the weirdest transition was between you and me,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we just worked that out when we
slides,
shuffled some of the slides around.
Okay.
I think just being I don't know. I like to do that stuff on the fly. So, Kyle, you'll probably get many different things from me if we did this again.
Uh-oh. Oh, well. I'm sure it'll be fine.
I just have one more thought. It occurred to me as I was looking at some of the intro slides. The portion where users would actually read the slide to set up their dependencies, VirtualBox and whatnot. That's probably the most critical thing for people to have eyeballs on so they can get caught up and get ready and whatnot. What I'm worried about is if I spend too much time on the slides that list out the individuals, then people aren't going to get a full eyeball of that stuff. So I was going to add another text file to the USB that just says, here, dependencies, read them, and I'll reference it. But I was also considering spending or going a little more quickly through the slides, not the actual portion where I talk through and say, here's so-and-so, here's so-and-so, here's so-and-so. But the amount of time I leave those slides up there, I was thinking about reducing that. Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I mean, I'll get through them, but what I'll probably end up doing is I'll leave the dependency slide up, and I'll introduce everybody. Then I'll go through the slides that introduce the people real quickly, saying, and here's our formal slides that show who we work for and whatnot. Okay?
You have the workshop requirement slide before the intro. And then you have the "Are you ready?" Isn't that?
Yeah. Let me jump.
I see what you're saying. You're saying you're going to leave the "Are you ready?" up for a little bit while you're still talking.
Well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'll leave the workshop requirement slide up, and I will introduce everybody, but I'll leave that slide there.
But yeah, I think also swapping slide number 1 and 2 so that we just start with workshop requirements up before anybody's even talking, and eventually 5 minutes in, when everybody's got there and is sitting down, half the people have already started on that, and then we move on to okay, this is Designate, blah blah blah, and the people, which gives us even more time on stage. If you get me?
Yeah, totally.
Are people, do we honestly believe, I know people are not going to show up with Vagrant on their box, do we believe that they'll be able to actually install Vagrant and VirtualBox during this whole hour and a half? I just don't see that being viable.
I mean, installing them is, I know on Linux it's...
They have to download them.
Oh, well, no, they're going to be on the USB key, so...
So you're going to hand them one...
Going to put those on the USB key as well as the Vagrant box itself. So you should be able to run the installers, which, on Linux anyway, that takes about 2.5 minutes to run through the installers for them.
And that's why we created a whole bunch of action items to improve the communication around, hey, don't forget to install these requirements beforehand.
And what if everybody shows up with Windows?
Well, the installers will be on the key again, so it'll be however long it takes Windows to run through the 2 installers.
Yeah, I've already downloaded all the... I went to the Vagrant page and downloaded every single packaged platform that they have. So I got the one Mac, the one Windows. There were 2 for Debian, and there were 2 for Red Hat.
Yeah. Does everybody on the team here have either Mac or Ubuntu? Is there anybody besides me that has Windows?
I think you might be the odd one out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, for a lot of corporations, though, that's the norm, not the exception.
Yeah, no, it is. But I think running through the installer shouldn't be a problem, especially when it's on the USB key.
Yeah, but I'm worried about the fact that I had to do all my Vagrant stuff through Cygwin. I didn't do.
Hold on, what?
I'm telling you, I didn't do. Okay, maybe it's just me, but a lot of the stuff that you want to run didn't work for me because I'm on Windows. I had to do a lot of special stuff to get things going.
Okay, none of us have been through that.
It's probably because I had to do the make, and they're not going to have to do the make, so it's probably a non-issue.
It's possibly. I know I have used Vagrant and VirtualBox on Windows before, and standard command, shell, no Cygwin, none of that were necessary. So
it's probably just the make. I'm pretty sure it was just the make then.
Yeah, I mean the make file that's just what I'm used to. So I wrote one of those, but. Yeah, they shouldn't need to know. They shouldn't need to do any of that once the box is built and distributed.
Okay, then we're good.
Ron, maybe as part of when you get in there to validate the VM, I don't know if this would take too much of your time, but if you were to uninstall Vagrant and then install it, but
yeah, I don't know if I'm going to have time for that. Management didn't carve any time for me to work on this week, so.
Okay. We'll see if we can. I think we can probably get a Windows laptop and do a trial run.
You realize we're like 2 cloud companies that sell Windows VMs.
What's that?
You realize we're 2 cloud companies with massive resources with Windows VMs available to us.
Yeah, in fact, I was just using one this morning, and I could not find Internet Explorer.
Yeah, so I think we can just boot one up and try it there. Well, that should be easy enough for us to have a work through and make sure it's fine.
Yeah. Betsy came up with the idea, so I'll let her do it.
Okay, so is that it then?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so on that then, I'm going to hop on a bus home, and I'll be back on when I get there.
Okay.
Well, it's late where y'all are.
Sorry?
Late in Ireland.
Late, yeah, it's, what is it now? 8 o'clock, yeah. Still bright at least, so. Okay, well look, I'm going to head off then. Speak to you guys later.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
All right.